On the road, in the gym, at a coffee house. No matter where you listen, this is Prevention Perk. I'm Steve Miller with Mid-America PTTC. It's time to perk up our prevention efforts. My guest today is Anna Simonson, the project director for a Regional Partnerships for Success grant in Missouri. She began her career as a prevention specialist in 2019, and she feels rewarded by being able to help community-led organizations leverage resources for effective, equitable, and sustainable community betterment. Hello, Anna, and welcome to Prevention Perk.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to have you here. This is going to be a great conversation. Like to get started with the first question, always the same. How in the world did you get into prevention work? What was your path to prevention like?
The path that I took to prevention was kind of a windy, bumpy one. I started out wanting several different things. Musical theater was one. I did hair and makeup for several years. And I think the underlying theme for me was to be of service to my community, to the people in my life. And I got a degree in psychology, looked into education. I actually taught and was certified in social studies education for 5th to 12th grade. And I came across a job posting for community partnership of the Ozarks for a prevention specialist. And having had experience working in the behavioral health field as a caseworker, I thought, ooh, this would be really cool. I had absolutely no clue what it was going to be, but I had been familiar with community partnership, and I knew that it was an organization that worked with people to make communities better and even individual experiences. So I applied and I got the job. And since that, I really feel that this is where I belong. What I love the most about prevention and being a prevention professional is empowering people to not only notice and be aware of the issues, but engage in strategies that help them solve issues, but also prevent them in the future. Having had worked with people on the other end of the spectrum in either treatment or recovery and battling mental health diagnoses at the same time, it intrigued me to understand maybe more about being proactive to try to help that potentially not happen for someone else.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. The funder of this project, along with all the other products of the Mid-America PTTC, is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Although funded by SAMHSA, the content of this recording does not necessarily reflect the views of SAMHSA. Talk, They Hear You is a national youth substance use prevention campaign that helps parents and caregivers, educators, and community members get informed, be prepared, and take action to prevent underage drinking and other substance use. To learn more, visit samhsa.gov/talk they hear you. Tell us a little bit about the PFS project that you lead.
I work in 10 counties in southwest and south central Missouri. And it's kind of an interesting project because it's different than the organizational PFS grant. And one of those things that's really interesting about this project is our meth use reduction or meth use prevention project. And that's coming down from the state level. The science behind it is that lab rats, having been exposed to substances of abuse or substances that can be addictive, when given the option to engage in consuming that substance or spending time with their buddies, they almost always will choose to spend time with their buddies. So the idea underneath this project is that maybe folks just need social bonding and that sense of belonging with their peers and their buddies. And so what we're trying to do in different ways, different parts of our grant and the different regions have different strategies. But what we're trying to do there is create the possibility for people to bond with each other as a preventative measure, pro-social alternative to using meth. And that's really strictly targeting adults ages 19 to 29. My project that I do is called Connection Kits. And it is essentially, after I did a little bit of research on my own with the people that I work with in the county that I work in, I learned that most people ages 19 to 29 have friends. They have social networks, and they already have a sense of belonging with one or two or more friends. And so building upon another division from community partnership during COVID, when people are in lockdown, they did family engagement kits where they would drop off supplies for families to do things together, to kind of build that togetherness for families. And I thought, why don't we do that for people ages 19 to 29 to reduce meth use? So we're giving it a shot. Our first connection kit was a guided paint, do-it-yourself guided paint party. And we just gave folks kits with instructions, and they painted some pumpkins. So I'm hoping that we'll get some feedback on it. As I said, it's not necessarily evidence-based at this point. It's just a really cool way for us to try to figure out creative ways to address substance misuse, across the lifespan in creative ways to really reach people where they are.
Something that's happening with the grant, you also are involved in really building out protective factors. And what's that look like?
Yes, so that's my main focus, and that's what I spend the most time on, and that's where my passion lies, is in building protective factors. So I do several different activities to build protective factors. One is the 40 Developmental Assets Framework, which is just a compilation of research that has been either conducted or compiled by Search Institute out of Minnesota. And really what it is just helping grown-ups create and sustain environments where mostly young people, but not just young people, where everyone has a place and everyone is valued and everyone can thrive, however that person is. And so it really is about finding and nurturing the strengths, the individual strengths each person holds, and being intentional about that. And that sounds kind of heavy, but it really just boils down to listening, seeing, acknowledging, smiling, connecting to opportunities, being the kind of person that you hope they can grow up to be. It's really, really simple. It sounds heavy. It's really, really simple. The 40 developmental assets is, in prevention, a lot of times we struggle with those actionable items. We talk a lot about data. We talk a lot about what's wrong. And oftentimes we find ourselves in conversations with communities about what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong. This is just a thing that we don't even have to talk about what's wrong. This is just a thing you can do that's going to fortify your community, that's going to build up your young people. And I love that so much. It's simple, it's easy, it's actionable. Another thing that we do is parent cafes, which this is new for me. I just learned how to facilitate these, and they're essentially an opportunity for parents and caregivers to get together and learn from each other in a safe, kind of guided environment where we answer questions and talk about ways that parents and caregivers can build their own protective factors for themselves and for each other. It's a really cool opportunity to meet with communities and reach people that might not be engaged with prevention or know much about prevention, and get people on board with understanding exactly what it is. Another brand new strategy that I'm using this year is Guiding Good Choices, which is it's also a research-based curriculum, but it's really, really great. It's been around for a long, long time. And it's probably my favorite curriculum for parents that I've ever been exposed to. It's designed for parents of young people ages 9 to 14. And it really just guides parents as they walk with their young people through the transition from childhood to that teenage young adult phase and era. And I love it. I'm looking forward to using that to be a better parent and also help others do the same.
So you describe, if I'm heard this correct, so you have this methamphetamine reduction component going on, and then you're talking about the protective factors and some of those parent cafes and the guided good choices. Do these stand alone, or is there overlap across the methamphetamine work? Are you embedding the protective factors, the cafes, guiding good choices? Is all of that a part of that effort, or are they separate standalone initiatives?
So, looking at it from the outside, I would say yes. The meth prevention or meth use reduction project is kind of on its own. My brain looks at it a little bit differently because what I know about social belonging is that it's a protective factor at most ages. Once you get to the age where you are socializing. So I feel like even though those two are kind of kept separate, and one of them is something that the whole state is doing together, and the other side, that side that I do kind of on my own that none of the other groups are doing, they're separate, but they're also intertwined, because for me, protective factors are the way, to do it. Strengthening those, building those, fortifying communities, empowering people, that's the way to go.
Do you see an audience interested in hearing the message about reduce your use or stop using after you've started? Because I'm assuming you're talking about a segment of the population that's not being identified as addicted yet.
Correct. So we're still in the prevention part of the continuum of care, which, if you know what that is, we're not to a diagnosis of substance use disorder yet. So we would say we're before we get to that addiction part. And what we are trying to do with this project is not let anyone fall through the cracks because they don't think that this is for them. So when you hear prevention and you've already engaged in use, you might say, that's not for me. I'm past that. And that's not what we want. What we want is for people, from never having used it, never having thought about using it, to people who might have experimented, to get this strategy to potentially help them not get to that other side of the continuum of care, to not cross that. One of my colleagues that I work with on this project, she calls it the line. Some people get really close to that line and they never get across. We're fortifying the line, and we are prevention, right? But we're not just strictly wearing the prevention hat. We're opening this strategy up to people in that age group, regardless of where they are.
And that's kind of unique, the age group 19 to 29, because I think historically, at least in the state of Missouri, it's kind of been that K through 12.
We are dealing with a huge age range of people who might just be exiting high school and entering college or entering the workforce, to people who have been married for years and have children and are established in their career. So it's a tricky thing to do, to kind of use this whole 10-year age group, especially that one, 19 to 29, is right. Unique. It's remarkable for the amount of developmental things that happen. It is tricky. It is tricky to get a universal group from 19 to 29, but using a pretty particular strategy. But I feel like for me, the best thing that we're doing is introducing young people to prevention, young adults to prevention. And so whether or not this is going to end up being the end-all, be-all prevention strategy, there are people across the state of Missouri who had no idea that there's anything like prevention, who now have education, who know statistics, and they know that it's not just this is your brain on drugs. It's actually kind of engaging your community and being a part of a bigger thing. So ultimately, yes, it's very tricky to get people to come to your events. Some people are throwing events, and we had one. And I think maybe 20% of the people that came were in the age group. So it's tricky. Prevention is never black and white and straightforward. And so I'm working to get the feedback that I need to kind of adjust my strategies to get the people that this funding is designed to serve. So yeah, to answer your question in a really long-winded way, it's really tricky, but it's also really cool to see people in this age group learning about prevention.
Now, tell me more about the activity kits.
So really, the kits are designed to bring social groups, so social networks, friend groups together to do.
So 4 or 5 guys could get together and come and engage in this, or friend groups at the college could come and.
They pick up the kit from a spot that we, work together with, and they then are given they have to take a survey when they register about their age, and then they can pick up the kits and then engage in a post survey that's run through the state that they provide for me. So ideally, it's friend groups socializing together, but mostly I would say, some of these folks might be like a married couple that are using this for a date night, which is great because if they're doing guided paint, then they're not out doing something else.
Closing down the bar.
So I think it's in its trial phase, and potentially there are people that have children that they're bringing this home for their children. But it states clearly in the instructions, this is for friend groups of, 3 to 5 people. So.
And it's an alternative activity is really what it comes down to. It's like,
yes,
if you engage in something that might spark your imagination, and you might find this is like, well, this is kind of cool. I didn't ever think about this. It might be something that I would want to invest my time in as opposed to what I've been giving my efforts and energy to up to this point.
Yeah. And for me, I feel like doing something like a guided paint, or we're doing, a fall baking recipe, and, that fall baking is the November one.
Cookies and breads and things like that.
So
yeah.
I feel like if, a lot of times when we're hanging out with our friends, as adults, it's kind of a weird situation unless you're part of a hobby group. There's not ever, we're going to the movies or potentially we're having dinner, but I feel like it's a unique opportunity for that social belonging, for that bonding to happen when you're learning something new together, when you're problem solving and, my pumpkin looks weird. It's a little offset. I feel like it gives adults the opportunity to bond in a way that they might not do in like your typical social setting.
Mm-hmm. So give me some more examples. You're talking about fall baking, painting. Is there other activities you have put together that will be coming in the future?
Yes. In December, it's going to be a white elephant gift exchange where I provide the white elephant gifts. And we've got, I don't have the list with me, but one of them is going to be water balloons and water guns for the next summer. And so I'm just really excited. We're going to do a escape room tickets to go to an escape room. So it's just a really neat project for me. And I love the complexities of the prevention involved.
Now, is this, you said you're in 10 counties. Is this every county, some counties, one county? Where's your focus with this?
This is just Jasper County, Missouri. This is just one county. And it's based on data that was gathered early on in this grant process. So it's really a cool project. I'm hoping that we can expand it because I think it's a really cool way to do adult substance use prevention. So I'm hoping that this can be something we move forward with.
And will you be introducing the developmental assets or some of the protective factor stuff that you talked about? Will some of that be introduced into this population as well?
So I had not originally thought to do that, but knowing that a lot of folks are either parents or are siblings of parents or interact regularly with young people, even in that 19 to 29-year-old age group. So my plan moving forward is to just provide a little kind of like rack card that says, here's some other things that you can access through community partnership of the Ozarks.
So talking about the parent cafes, is that what you call them, or community cafes, parent cafes,
Yes.
and the protective factors, is that a certain population? Are you rural, urban? There's overlap? Where do you find yourself unpacking these practices?
So my hope is to have parent cafes in all of the 9 other counties that we serve. And that's it. That's kind of a challenge because at this point, 3 of those counties do not have substance use prevention coalitions. So it would be me just kind of showing up and saying, hey, come to my event. But parent cafes are for everyone who's heavily involved in raising children. So it doesn't have to be rural focus. It doesn't have to be, parents of teens or parents of young children. There are ways to target specific demographics. So there is a parent cafe for parents of older teens. There's one for parents of young people who are part of the LGBTQIA plus community. There's one that has to do with social justice and equity. And there's one for just dads, which is kind of cool. So you can really make it specific. And I plan to do that once I get a little bit more familiarized with this.
Is your audience more rural or?
Yes.
Yeah.
My community, my counties that I serve, for the most part, are rural counties. Jasper County is the outlier because they have several.
It's an urban center.
It's an
People
urban
that may not know if they're listening, it's a higher population. It's
Yes.
over 100,000 people. So some people might think, well, that's tiny, but for our area, it's an urban center. And then some of the communities you're in are
very small.
Yeah.
There's one community that only has one school district in the whole county. So mostly rural, mostly lightly populated. So not many folks around, but beautiful, I will say. I love driving around Southwest and South Central Missouri. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world, if you ask me.
So in the time you've been doing this, so you're talking about a whole campaign that doesn't really exist around meth,
Yeah.
and then you're unpacking protective factors and developmental assets and some of that work. What's been some of the challenges that you've had to really address as you're doing this work?
I think one of the major challenges, and it's welcome because it makes me believe that people care, is the acceptance sometimes of the resources that I can provide. So a lot of times when you come in as a prevention professional to a community that has very light prevention presence or no prevention presence, and you're saying, here's evidence that your youth are doing drugs. And, it's hard to swallow that pill, especially if you're a community leader or if you haven't been on that side of the experience in your communities. And so I welcome that from community members who might say I want to see a different survey. I want to see more data. I don't believe you. This isn't the community that I live in. I welcome that because number one, it means they care and they're listening. But number two, it means that the conversation's open. And so you can say something like, I can accept and validate that. How about let's do some assessment? I'll work with you and I'll, help support you gathering this information on your own. And so it kind of opens the door for me, but that's a huge challenge for me. Also, a challenge for me is oftentimes when we're having conversations surrounding prevention, the topics of conversation tend to be all about problems and problem behaviors, which is a very important thing to talk about. But for me, I like to focus on very, very quickly to say this is what the problem is based on what we know. And here's everything I have to give you to help support your community. And we can work together if none of this is what you want, to find a solution that works for you. I find it challenging to just kind of go through the motions of listening to all, well, I know somebody who has this experience, and kind of the one-sided approach to a conversation about prevention, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the successes that you feel like you've had?
Success across the board, probably my favorite success from this whole project is there is a new substance use prevention coalition in one of the counties that we've, as far as I know, through our Prevention Resource Center, we've never had a registered prevention coalition in this county. And so it's a rural county, but there are so many people in this county who are champions for making their community better, and being able to be part of what I think will be a great success, being able to be part of the foundational process for that is probably what I'm the most proud of at this point. I'm also very, very proud to have the opportunity to learn everything that I get to learn about parenting and being a positive adult and helping other grown-ups be able to not only make better outcomes for young people, but also feel really good about their relationships with the young people in their lives.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. A podcast is like a breakout session from your daily routine. It's a unique way to perk up your prevention efforts. We'd like to hear from you. Please send your comment, topic, or guest suggestion to midamericapttc@gmail.com. They'll be able to read about you in the show notes. You provided a small bio, and I really appreciated your opening line is that you're the proud wife and mom. So you have a teen now, it says here, and an itty-bitty, a 9-month. How is prevention specialist mom at home with a 13-year-old, and now, not that the new baby's getting a whole lot out of it, but...
I feel like since I have started work in prevention, who I am as a person has completely changed. But more, specifically as a mom, I am more patient, and I listen. I learned in one of the trainings that I do with 40 developmental assets that when you're listening to someone, you should listen as if you're going to have to either repeat or summarize what they're saying to you. So old mom Anna would probably hear one thing that my son would say in a whole conversation. I would hear one thing and my brain would go straight to that. So new mom Anna, I just actively listen as though I'm going to have to summarize what my son is saying. And oftentimes he tells me things that I wish I didn't know, but what I'm the most proud of is that open line of communication, and that he feels safe to talk to me for now, hopefully. And I will say that one of the most profound things that I've learned in general is to allow young people just to be young people, and to not have an expectation set on them for managing my emotions as well as theirs, and reframing my language. So, I have a baby. She's 9 months old. When she was a baby, a little baby, one morning, I wake up with her at night. It's an agreement that my husband and I have together. But one morning after a particularly rough evening, overnight period, my husband said to me, "Did she give you a rough time last night?" And I said, "No, she had a rough time last night." And so because I'm the person that takes care of her, we did that together. But that's something that we can do together. And I think just that shift of my perspective is so profound, because the way that I look at her in the way that she'll go through her struggles is just completely shifted. It's not that she's giving me a rough time and said she's having one.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. The Search Institute has identified 40 positive supports and strengths that young people need to succeed. Half of the assets focus on the relationships and opportunities they need in their families, schools, and communities. The remaining assets focus on the social and emotional strengths, values, and commitments that are nurtured within young people. To learn more, visit searchinstitute.org. Before we get away, what's one thing that you would like for the audience to think, say, or do? A resource you want to share with them, or some parting bit of wisdom that maybe we didn't touch on as we've talked about your work with the Partnership for Success grant?
I think the most useful bit that I can provide is a quote from the 40 Developmental Assets. It's Yuri Bronfenbrenner, who is fundamental in creating that framework. And he says that every young person needs at least one adult who loves them irrationally. And knowing what we know about positive adults in the lives of young people, that can be anyone, but that can mean that anyone and everyone has the power to greatly change someone's life just by caring.
Yeah. It's really, and when you say that, it made me think. I have a family that lives in my neighborhood, and they've adopted children from the foster care system, and their youngest daughter in that set has befriended me in some way, shape, or form. And her mom told me that she said, I had to tell you this just after it happened. She had her caseworker and her daughter were talking, and she said something to the effect of, I have another trusted adult in my life, and it's Mr. Steve.
Oh, I love that so much.
So that's kind of cool, because it just means that somehow or another she sees me as somebody that, you know, there's not a barrier there between us. We're just neighbors.
Yep.
And she does things for me, and then I find alternative activity things for her to do. She likes art and that kind of stuff, what 9-year-old girls like. And I ask for a lot of support from other people. What would a 9-year-old girl like this? You know, because I don't know. It's just kind of fun to have that opportunity to do that and be there as a positive force, not only for her, but there's the other children as well. So it's fun.
And what I think people would benefit from knowing is that's prevention. That's substance use prevention. That's suicide prevention. That's mental health promotion. That's across the board protection from those negative outcomes.
My guest on this episode has been Anna Simonson. You'll be able to find some links to connect with Anna and some of the work that she's doing in the show notes. Thanks, Anna, for being here. Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you for listening to Prevention Perk, a podcast from Mid-America PTTC. To learn more about our innovations, visit pttcnetwork.org and look under Your PTTC for the Mid-America link. Remember, prevention is better together, and together we are stronger.